Welcome. We're happy to have everyone here for another Young Aurora webinar. I'm here to welcome you on behalf of the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative, which was founded exactly 10 years ago today and continues to awaken humanity through courage, commitment, and impact of our luminaries. The Aurora Humanitarian Initiative elevates the unsung heroes of this world, grassroots humanitarians who are tackling pressing challenges in our society. Through Young Aurora, we aim to inspire the next generation toward humanitarian action. We're proud to partner in this initiative with UWC International, with African Leadership Academy, and Teach for All. Young Aurora is by design an opportunity for our students to learn, but it's also an opportunity for us to learn from all of you and hear your ideas. So we encourage you to share your questions and thoughts from this webinar with our presenter today. We're so grateful to have Andrew Nalani with us here today to talk about how to present and pitch your humanitarian project. A quick reminder before we get into the webinar that the announcement of this cycle's winner will be Wednesday, March 26th at 4 p.m. UTC. That event will be live streamed through the Aurora and the UWC IO social media channels. Now it's my pleasure to welcome Andrew. Andrew Nalani is an interdisciplinary community psychologist and assistant professor of human and organizational development. He studies the organizational dynamics of youth work in community-based and institutional settings. He is also a UWC US alum, and he has previously moderated our Young Aurora panels, so we're happy to have him back to share some strategies with our Young Aurora teams today. Andrew?
Thank you so much for having me, Sally, and it's a delight to share little insights around presentation with the Aurora group. And I had a chance to read over the finalists' projects, and this is just inspiring work, and especially in this moment in time, to see ideas of humanitarianism and entrepreneurialism and social change take shape, especially by younger generations, is inspiring. I am not going to present slides today, but I'm going to walk through some insights that I have gleaned from my own experience communicating to different kinds of audiences. In 2018, I had the chance to share my story as a social change agent at the Goalkeepers Awards that the Gates Foundation pulls together every year. And for me, that moment was I think, the most visible audience and the most nerve-wracking audience that I've had to engage with. And my day-to-day work involves a lot of communicating and a lot of sharing a perspective to bring other people on board. And so my goal today is to harvest some key pointers that could be useful for the Aurora Humanitarian Prize finalists as they prepare for their 3-minute pitches. And so I'm going to move slowly. I tend to get really excited when I'm talking about ideas that motivate me. But I'm going to try to move slowly. And I thought I would begin by sharing a poem with you all. I love poetry, and it's one of the ways that I express myself best. And so here is a poem called The Woodcover. Um, this poem is one that I came across through a leadership retreat, and I thought I'd share with you all as a way of capturing what happens when we are asked to present or to speak in front of an audience. So here's the wood cover. King, the master carver, made a bell stand. This King, the master carver, made a bell stand of precious wood. When it was finished, all who saw it were astounded. They said it must be the work of spirits. The Prince of Lul said to the master carver, "What is your secret?" King replied, "I am only a workman. I have no secret. There is only this. When I began to think about the work you commanded, I guarded my spirit, did not expend it on trifles that were not to the point. I fasted in order to set my heart at rest. After 3 days fasting, I had forgotten gain and success. After 5 days, I had forgotten criticism. After 7 days, I had forgotten my body with all its limbs. And by this time, all thought of your highness and of the court had faded away. All that might distract me from the work had vanished. I was collected in the single thought of the bell stand. Then I went to the forest to see the trees in their own natural state. When the right tree appeared before my eyes, the bell stand also appeared in it, clearly, beyond doubt. All I had to do was put forth my hand and begin. If I had not met this particular tree, there would have been no bell stand at all. What happened? My own collected thought encountered the hidden potential in the wood, and from this live encounter came the work which you ascribe to the spirits. If I had not met this particular tree, there would have been no bell stand at all. What happened? My own collected thought encountered the hidden potential in the wood. From this live encounter came the work which you ascribe to the spirits. So this poem, which I will put in the handout that will come your way, the wood cover, is one that I think speaks to the fears of being asked to share an idea, to share your story, to share of yourself in front of an audience. And in this poem, we have somebody we call the master cover, who is asked to create a bell stand. And eventually, this master cover, he is able to create the bell stand. However, before he goes to the bell stand, he says, when I began to think of the work you commanded, I guarded my spirit. I did not expend it on trifles that were not to the point. If you are like me and many normal people, you probably are going to feel nervous and anxious of public speaking. They say over 75 of the population is, and there are more people who are afraid of public speaking than they are of spiders or heights or even death. And when we spend time preparing with the right frameworks, with useful principles, and with generative practices, we are able to calm that anxiety of public speaking. And we're able to shine without having to worry, like the bell stand, the master cover, without having to worry about how our words are going to be received, without having to worry about the content of what it is that we are creating, and without having to worry about our own self-worth. So my goal in these next 20 or so minutes is to share with you a few nuggets that I have found helpful in my own communication work. Not just in entrepreneurial social change spaces, but also in my day-to-day job. My goal is to support my students in thinking critically about issues related to social change, community psychology, organizations. And each day I walk into the classroom, I have to offer a pitch on why they should care. And so my presentation is grouped in three. I'm going to share three key principles on how to present effectively, how to pitch effectively. What are general design principles you want to keep in mind in order to have an effective presentation. And then I'm going to share with you within each of those principles, I'm going to share with you some frameworks that could be useful. Frameworks are ways of organizing your content such that your audience can follow what you're trying to communicate and perhaps be compelled to the kind of action you are calling them to take. And then lastly, I will provide some exercises for you to think about. I call these practices. I will pose some questions that can support you to experiment with putting these principles and frameworks together for your own context. Again, you are the experts of your projects. You are the experts of this, of competing for this prize. And my role is to support you in developing some frameworks and principles that allow you to adapt what I'm sharing to your own context. The first principle that I want to share with you is know your audience. Um, Most times we tend to enter communication spaces in ways where we want to show the audience or to tell everyone everything that we know about a topic. But we forget that it is not necessarily about us, it is about the audience. Who am I presenting to? What do they care about? How am I going to get my point across so that they can partner with me in making my vision possible? And so, some accompanying frameworks for knowing your audience, first of all, is to define it. Who would you say is going to be the main recipient of your communication? So, when I teach, for example, my primary audience is my students. When I am delivering a talk for the goalkeepers event that is being hosted by the Gates Foundation, this is several humanitarian stakeholders who are in the audience. If I am communicating with my boss, my department chair, I need to know what does my department chair care about enough to engage with my content. And so most times we jump to our content without really defining who the audience is. And the central principle here is once you understand your audience, you're going to be able to curate the content in such a way that it does not overwhelm the people who are listening to you. You want your audience to be engaged, not overwhelmed. So you may be asking, how do you do that? After you've defined your audience, you define what do they care about? In this case, you're going to be presenting your project, you're going to be pitching your project in front of panelists. The panelists are asking themselves a question, are you the team that deserves to win these many dollars that we have to give up? And if so, what convinces us? So you may want to do an experiment around what does this audience care about, and on what basis is a decision going to be made about the content we present. So in terms of frameworks, you can think about how you may want to hook the audience. How do you want to draw them in? And usually when people talk about hooks, it can feel very mechanical. Well, like begin with a story or begin with a statistic. I will say any of the hooks that you use should feel natural to you. And so in this presentation, I began with a poem because that is natural to me and to the way that I express what it is I'm trying to bring across. And in that poem, there is somebody who is trying to create something, and I use that as a story to bring you in and consider the frameworks I'm sharing with you. So here are 5 cues that you may use as frameworks for how to hook the audience, for how to hook the people who are listening to you. You can start your presentation with a question. Did you know that most people are afraid of public speaking more than they are of death, spiders, or heights? A simple question like that can actually bring you can open up the imagination of the people who are listening to you. You can begin with a quote or a proverb for that matter. You can also begin with a quandary. You can pose something that feels like a puzzle. Um, how is it that we have advanced AI, and yet people are still struggling to raise their scores in classrooms on math and science. How is it that humanity has made such progress technologically, in terms of infrastructure, and yet some people are still homeless? You can pose a puzzle that puts one thing side by side with another thing that makes the audience go, come to think of it, that is a puzzle, that is a quandary. You can use quantity, you can quantify, you can pose a statistic that helps the audience actually see the magnitude of the challenge that it is that you're trying to offer a solution for. And finally, you can offer a bit of a quarrel, something that drives you mad. You, especially if you're talking about human rights, something that addresses an issue where like this is not okay, and I'm here to quarrel about it. Somebody in a scholar has written a book, and the book is about it is about the social safety net in the U.S. And that book came as a result of an op-ed that she wrote. And the op-ed, this is Jessica Kalako, who is a professor of sociology. The op-ed was titled, Other Countries Have Social Safety Nets. America Has Women. That is an example of a quarrel. It's a statement that is saying something is not right. And I am going to pause it in such a way that later on in my presentation, I'm going to offer the solution or the pathway for solving that. So I've just offered you a 5Q framework for how to open up a pitch. You can introduce your presentation with a question. You can provide a quote. You can pose a quandary. You can quantify, you can pose a quantity, you can show a statistic, and you can present a quarrel, something that is not right with the world. With any of these hooks that you use, the goal here is to open up the imagination of the audience so that they are working with you, they are engaging with you. You're getting them interested enough for them to say, tell me more. It is not just picking one random quote or proverb and throwing it at the beginning of your presentation. Actually, it is really thinking through what strategy is going to get participants to say, or the audience to say, tell me more. Here's something you can try actually when you are preparing your presentation. Imagine you are in a cafeteria or a cafe, and there's a napkin that is laying around. What is the message you would want to put on the back of that napkin that summarizes what your project or your initiative is about in one or two sentences that will get a stranger who looks at that napkin 2 hours after you've left? The stranger looks at that napkin and say, I want to know more about this. What are those two sentences you would put on the back of that napkin? So that is an exercise you can practice as you brainstorm ways of opening your presentation. Again, here the principle was know your audience. You have 5 cues for how to open your pitch, how to bring the audience in. And the practice is what is the message you put on the back of a napkin so that a stranger can call you up and say, tell me more. All right. The second principle is tell your story. Tell your story to demonstrate why we should care. Why should your audience care about what you have to say? Now, for this finalist round, you have a very interesting challenge, which is you only have 3 minutes to demonstrate why your audience, which is the panelist of judges, should care. And here, the frameworks that I have to share with you are three. First, show, don't tell. um, a lot of your audience is going to be judging you on why should you be the team to receive this funding and support in order to accomplish your project. Um, if you are just telling people here is the initiative, here is the name of the initiative, here is what we're going to do versus showing here is why. Maybe you're showing some photos of the community you're going to be working with. Maybe you are highlighting some quotes that you've collected from participants. Maybe you are highlighting a certain statistic that is showing why this issue is of interest. The goal here is to provide an immersive experience for your audience versus an experience that is overwhelming. So instead of coming and saying, listen, I have 10 years of experience speaking in front of an audience, and I'm going to tell you all the 100 things that you should know about public speaking, it's saying, no, how am I going to summarize what I need to tell you in a set of principles, a set of frameworks, and set of practices? What stories can I share with you to take you into the experience? And so my students, for example, they learn best when I create an exercise for them to participate. Let's say when we are exploring how do you learn to understand how power works when you're in a community setting. I give them an exercise that we call power mapping. They get to see who has power, who doesn't have power, who has more of it, who has less of it, which kinds of power come up. Instead of me giving a lecture for a full hour, 15 minutes on power, I get them to actually experience it in the classroom. So a scenario that I give them is we are at a community meeting and we're trying to decide whether or not we are going to let a real estate developer come into our community and develop a piece of property. Some people are for, and some people are against. Some people have no relatives who are part of this organization, of this real estate company. And so we begin to actually experience this power dynamic in real time. So a question that I pose for you is, how are you going to get the audience to immerse themselves in the story of your initiative? The way of doing that is actually through story. Your presentation will have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Good stories usually have that kind of arc. The beginning we've sort of talked about, which is how do you hook the audience in? In the middle, you're telling a story of why should the audience care, and why should the audience care about two things? Why should the audience care about you as a team, and why should the audience care about the initiative itself? One practice that you can use to bring this principle to life in your pitch is what the leadership practitioner at the Harvard Kennedy School, Marshall Gans, calls public narrative. And this is a framework that is a lot more detailed than how I'm going to summarize it. But there are three components in this framework. The first is that you tell a story of self. How come I came to care about this initiative? And so at the beginning of this presentation, I shared with you that I do a lot of communication in my role. And in 2018, I gave the highest visibility speech of my life up until that point. And I was telling people, here's why we should care about youth development. And I began by sharing a story about my own experience at UWC and how that opened up my whole world. And then in that speech, I go from a story of self to a story of us. In the story of us, you're connecting what you care about with what your audience cares about. And so, in my case, my audience was a group of humanitarians, and I wanted to connect my story about my transformative experience in an education context that valued both academic competence and social emotional learning competence. And I created this bridge between me and the audience by sharing where we are at in the world today, how is it the case that more young people are going through their education experience without feeling alive about it? When you create the bridge between what you care about and what the audience cares about, you are engaging them and bringing them to the table. And the question they're going to be asking after that is, what now? And that is the third part in this framework by Marshall Gans, which is the story of now. What is the call to action that you are asking your audience to engage in? And so for you all, your call to action is, here's why you should invest in our project. Here is why our project deserves the 10,000. Not necessarily because we are brilliant as a team, but because we have set up the story in such a way that we are showing you that there is an issue. Here are the solutions that have been tried, and here's why those solutions are not adequate. Here is our solution and our answer. Here's our own piece of the puzzle that we are offering as a form of medicine to the problem. Here's why you should invest in us. This is the story of now. So a practice for you when you're putting your pitch together, identify, are those three elements present in your pitch? Do we understand, does the panel understand how you come to care about this issue? Does your pitch allow the panel to feel like they understand why they should care? Not just because you care, but because you've been compelling in showing that you have a medicine for a social ill, that you have a solution for a quandary, that you have a way of solving the puzzle that is different or new compared to other ways that this issue has been solved. And lastly, you want to know, have we met the ask? Have we asked the panel, have we asked the audience to invest in us? So that is principle number 2. Make sure the audience understands your why, and you do that by telling your story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The last principle is to shape your promise. There's nothing like having a spotlight and speaking and then coming away feeling like you just did an information dump without really shaping what it is that you are offering in return of an investment. And here there are 2 frameworks for you to be aware of. The first is demonstrating traction. Do you have timelines in your pitch for how you're going to get the work done? Do you have indicators of success? What will success actually look like when you're implementing this initiative? When you do this, you're able to demonstrate to your panel that your project or your initiative is feasible. In the first 6 months, in the first 3 months, we are going to accomplish this. We will know we've succeeded when X, Y, and Z happen. In the next 6 months, we are going to accomplish A, B, C, D. We will know we have succeeded when, and then once the project is done, we will determine whether we have contributed, whether this initiative has made a difference by X, Y, and Z. Okay. So demonstrate traction. And then the second thing, demonstrate the readiness of your team to accomplish the initiative. Here you want to highlight what kinds of skills different members of your team bring that help you accomplish your initiative, or even the nature of diversity of your team that allows you to look at the issue or the problem from different angles. Emphasize both the soft skills, the people skills, as well as the technical skills. Here, you want to ask yourself as a form of practice, why would a skeptic give us this investment? So that is the third principle, is to shape your promise, demonstrate traction, and demonstrate the readiness of your team. And as a form of practice, when you have delivered your pitch in your rehearsals, ask yourself, would a skeptic be compelled by our pitch? And so those are the 3 principles. Know your audience, tell your story so that we understand your why, and then shape your promise. I hope that these principles and the frameworks and the little exercises that I've offered will be of support as you prepare your pitch. I will make sure that you have a handout with these principles, frameworks, and practices. And I wish you all the best as you prepare your pitches. And the last thing I'm going to say before I pause is that remember that you are a human being and your panelists are human beings. And so, to the extent that you can practice, 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 and then allow your own humanity to shine through, you will be compelling versus being a robot. And trust that you are the expert here, and you want to leave the panelists saying, "Tell me more." Well, that's what I have for you, and thank you so much for giving me a chance to share these insights with you all.
Thank you
Sally.
so much, Andrew. We really appreciate having you here. I love how outlined your key principles of knowing your audience and convincing them why they should care and really curating content to be digestible and compelling while also encouraging them to take action. You gave some really good examples for our teams to consider. I have a couple questions if you can answer a few, just to give some additional context that maybe our teams can apply. How can teams effectively balance storytelling with data to make their pitch both emotional and credible?
That's a good question. Thank you for that, Sally. I will say the think of data. I tend to think of data as as a form of storytelling. That I'm a researcher and I collect both qualitative and quantitative data. But just because I have the data does not necessarily mean that my audience, which is another group of researchers or practitioners, actually understand the meaning of those data. And so I would ask, what meaning do you want the audience to get out of the data that you present? And it is that meaning that you lead with. So for example, I could have shared a slide that shows here are the trends of public speaking. And I show you one slide that shows that 70% of people are afraid of public speaking more than they are of spiders and death and heights. And then I show another example of you know, differences in regions, opportunities that young people have in public speaking, who has them, who does not. If I don't actually offer a frame, my audience will actually be easily overwhelmed by the data I present versus helping and holding the audience by the hand and say, I've just showed you a piece of data. Here's how we should be making sense of it. And so I wouldn't think of storytelling as separate from data. I would actually say data anchors storytelling, and storytelling frames what the audience should get out of the data. And so if you're presenting an initiative around beekeeping, you can show us a statistic that shocks the panelists into caring. Great. Now hold the panelist's hand and say, by the way, here's what has been done to address the issue. But look, the data is showing us that what people are doing to address this issue is actually making the issue worse.
Mm,
Here is our medicine and our solution. So every part of your 3-minute pitch should be storytelling, anchoring that storytelling in data and using the storytelling to frame so that you are actually in control of what you want participants to get or the panel to get from what you're sharing with us. You want that panel to leave going into the room to make judgments and knowing, oh yeah, this team is the beekeeping team. You want to be known for something. Uh,
yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. I like that. And I also think you said spiders and heights and everything. I think some people would choose spiders and heights over public speaking. So my next question is about that. How would you recommend that our teams handle their nerves and maintain confidence during their pitch? Especially, it can be difficult. You just presented online and you can't see people's faces all the time. They will be able to see some faces, but how can they kind of maintain their calm during their pitch?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good question. And I will say, if you're feeling nervous, that means you're human. I get nervous all the time, every single day when I walk in front of the classroom, and they're skills that are useful. I tend to think of this idea of skeletons and flesh, and the skeleton is something I can rely on, the thing that I fall back on when the unpredictable happens or the unexpected happens. What do I mean by that? You're going to feel nervous anyway, so you should prepare. If I have not prepared, my nerves are actually going to overtake. My amygdala is going to fire and it's going to overtake when I show up to pitch without actually having prepared. So the first thing I would say is rehearse, 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 rehearse. Know every line of each section, every line that begins each section of your pitch, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Know the first line and the closing line so that you are aware of what it is you're intending to communicate. When you rehearse, even when you stumble on the day of, you're able to actually fall back on your skeleton and say, I know where I'm going. So the first thing is to rehearse. The second thing I'm going to say is in your rehearsal, don't be afraid of bringing critics in. So people who can actually role play skepticism, people who can role play disinterest, have a way of being comfortable with with an audience that may not necessarily have the kind of reaction you want them to have, so that your body is getting used to that. So again, that is part of rehearsal. The other thing I'll say is breathe.
Don't forget that. Yeah.
Don't forget to breathe. I think these are human beings who are going to be listening to you, and when you follow some of the principles I've mentioned, instead of overwhelming the audience, you can take your time, pause, drink some water. Find ways of having natural pauses so that the audience can digest what it is that you're trying to tell them. And I don't know whether these are going to be online or whether they're going to be in person. Sally, will they be online?
Online. They'll be online. Yeah.
They'll be online. And so in that case, I would say practicing your pacing is going to be incredibly important. In that practice, really see where might you have pauses. Sometimes, because it's a 3-minute pitch, I would encourage you to write it out. Write it out, and in your script, actually mark where are you going to take a pause so that you can recollect yourself. The more in touch you are with your breath, the more you're going to be able to express emotionally and confidently, and your audience receiving you with that resonance. And then the last thing that I'll say is, once you've done your rehearsal, once you have prepared your script, once you're doing your breathing, is to really feel okay with your preparation and to give yourself the benefit of doubt that you've done everything in your power and within your control. And now it's the judges to make a decision. And so instead of trying to overly control the outcome, focus on the process, and then surrender. After you know you've done what you could do, always tell yourself, I think I've done my best here.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was really helpful, and I think will be helpful to them. I'll ask you one more question and then we can close out. Even if they do all that rehearsing, even if they do everything, what's a strategy you would say that they can use if they do run out of time or if they forget part of their pitch? What's a quick way that they can, get the jury's attention and kind of leave them with that morsel, like you said, the message on the napkin in a really short amount of time if they have to summarize and truncate what they want to present.
Yeah, wow, that's a really good question. One framework that I learned in my work in group facilitation is one of having my intention in mind and then having a series of choices that are connected to that intention. So if my intention is to present about skills for pitching your presentation, and then I realize that, oh my goodness, we are really coming to time. Usually when we get nervous and when we look at the clock, we tend to change our intention
Mm,
It's changing our choices connected to that intention. And so if I keep my intention in mind, which is to communicate skills for how to pitch a presentation. And maybe let's say I had four principles instead of three, or maybe I said we have three. I can actually be human and say, I said I have three principles. Our time is running out for me to cover the third one, but let me just remind you of the two that I have mentioned. So you can actually use memory. You can use reminders,
yeah,
repetition helps here. Remind the audience of what it is that you set out to do, and then move to the call to action. Um,
very important.
so if the audience can remember and repeat, if you can use repetition, so that the audience can remember what it is you set out to do, the audience will be forgiving if you stay composed and you connect back to your intention instead of shifting the intention itself. Shift your choices.
I like that. Thank you. Yeah, I think the intention is the key. So just stay mindful of that and make sure your message has come across. Anything else you'd like to conclude with for our teams to think about this cycle?
Absolutely. No one wants to hear a presenter who is so low, who is such in a low mood. No one, no one wants to hear a presenter who does not bring the life and the sunshine.
Mm.
So if you're not excited about your initiative, it's going to show, and the judges are going to pick up on it. Be so convinced about this initiative that even if you do not get the funding, this is something you would try to do because you believe in it. If you bring that sense of enthusiasm, that sense of being convinced that, yeah, no, the world will stop if we don't do this initiative. If you bring that sense of aliveness, the urgency will shine through, and you'll get the panelists to think twice before they deny you. And so I would say bring your aliveness and let your personality shine through your presentation. Um, if it helps, there's some people who do exercises like stretching in front of a mirror, and there are all kinds of, there's some people who do voice exercises. They do a little kind of just blabbering through and clearing their voices, whatever it is you need to do, playing some music before you present, anything that allows your personality to shine through will be effective in convincing the panelists that you care.
That's great advice. Thank you so much, Andrew. This was really great. Thank you for being with us and continuing to be a friend of Young Aurora. And we look forward to you tuning in, hopefully, for to see who wins this cycle, and then when we announce the competition for next cycle.